Hello BookTube, this is Weekly Reads. This week's readings have been markedly better than last week's readings. So let's get going with the books. So I ended last week and started this week reading The Impeachers, The Trial of Andrew Johnson and the Dream of a Just Nation by Brenda Wineapple. This is a history of the impeachment of or the first impeachment of a U.S. president, Andrew Johnson, who was impeached for violating the Tenure of Office Act, a questionably constitutional law that was designed to protect Secretary of War Edwin Stanton from being fired, as Stanton did his utmost to prevent Andrew Johnson from losing the peace, which Johnson was enthusiastically trying to do. So at the end of the Civil War, there were, I guess, two opinions, two sort of policies as to what to do with the former Confederacy. For Johnson, since the Confederacy could not legally leave the Union, they never did leave, and that the states could be readmitted immediately as they were when they left, just minus slavery. And that would mean that the newly constituted state governments, which were essentially caretakers appointed by Johnson, could then enact what laws they wanted, which usually meant the newly emancipated were practically re-enslaved. Meanwhile, Republicans in Congress, who were a commanding majority, saw things differently, that laws had to be enacted at least to protect the newly emancipated, giving them suffrage, or at least the men suffrage, ensuring that their civil rights were protected, that they could freely move about and seek employment where they wanted, so on and so forth. So this conflict and the sort of increasing polarization that mounted during Johnson's accidental presidency resulted eventually in his impeachment. And so the book covers the lead up to the impeachment, the trial itself, the verdict, which includes quite a bit of bribery and other shenanigans. A number of the Republicans who did vote to acquit were almost certainly bribed. And then a bit of a epilogue showing what happened to those involved, which a good number of them died shortly after the impeachment in the 1870s. So I had a rough start with the book on Thursday and into Friday. But then with Saturday, I really started to get into it, and then when I finished it on Sunday, I was quite enjoying it. So I really enjoyed this book. I do have a few issues with it. I think Brenda Wineapple tries to make I don't know, because in the subtitle she mentions Dream of a Just Nation, which, while that's clearly what the so-called radical Republicans wanted, I don't know, she doesn't really go into much detail about it as a policy and how widely that dream was shared, particularly among non-literary citizens. So there's that, and I think she also tries, particularly with the trial, to sort of turn it into this grand sort of narrative moment where rather than arguing the minutiae of whether or not Johnson violated the Tenure of Office Act, or what his intentions were when he did violate it, that that this conflict should be more about where the nation is going. Is the United States going to basically be what it was before the Civil War, just without slavery, or will America be a more just nation? And then I think with the epilogue, where she sort of touched on what happened after, I think a bit more could have been done with the legacy of of impeachment, namely sort of the historiography afterwards. Not only like the sort of kind of sort of how historians saw and how popular culture saw impeachment afterwards, and how that legacy has evolved over time. But it should be noted that in the summation, Wineapple does say that while there were arguments for acquittal, that Johnson was justly impeached. He should have been impeached for what he was doing. And perhaps probably removed as well. And she does make the case quite convincingly that President Johnson should be up there in the top 3 worst U.S. presidents ever, alongside Trump and Buchanan. Nixon's comfortably number 4, I would say. But anyway, so I rather enjoyed The Impeachers. And after I read The Impeachers, I read American Comics, A History by Jeremy Dauber. This is a history of American comics from Thomas Nast in the mid-19th century to basically the decline and fall of the newspaper comic strip and the weird status of American comic books today. This book was a delight to read. I loved every moment with this book. It is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite books so far this year. I especially liked the sort of some of the analysis of the comics, the attention paid to underground comics, to less mainstream comics. If I do have a critique of the book, though, it's that once comic books appear, little attention is paid to comic strips and newspapers until their eventual decline and fall. Peanuts, the storied comic strip that I think most people of my generation or know, gets a few mentions, but not much analysis. The same is true with Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, Cathy, so on and so forth. And the focus is primarily on comic books and superhero comic books. I wish there were a bit more analysis of the international influence of how American comics influenced comics around the world, as well as these comics influencing America, namely manga, which Dauber does do a bit on, but not necessarily more recent manga, although a number of really popular series, Dragon Ball, Naruto, get mentions, but I think a bit more could be done. And I think towards the end, he focuses on the travails of current comic book companies, and he mentions that for the first time in decades, in the mid-2000s or mid-2010s, the Fantastic Four were essentially canceled, that there were no ongoing Fantastic Four series. And I think Dauber neglects to mention why, or a more accurate argument of why, which is that the CEO of Marvel, Ike Perlmutter, in a fit of pique, wanted to de-emphasize the comic books that Marvel did not completely control, namely within the movies. At the time, Marvel did not own the film rights to the Fantastic Four or the X-Men or to Spider-Man, and of the three, the Fantastic Four were the least popular, so they could be canceled. While Spider-Man, nothing much really happened with him, and I mean, there was also an attempt to de-emphasize the X-Men to favor the Inhumans, which is also why the Inhumans were such a major part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC and had their own one-season series. So, anyway. But besides those critiques, I mean, I love this book and really just, it is a favorite of mine. So, yeah, highly, highly recommended. So, that wraps up what I read. So I'll go and touch on what I'm going to be reading this coming reading week, and then I'll talk about what I've been watching, because I do want to touch on that too. So let's get to this coming week's reads. I'll be reading over the weekend and Monday if needed, The Folding Star by Alan Hollinghurst. This is his second novel that I've had a checkered history with. I've had this book for years, and I had to go at it in about maybe 10, 15 years ago, and didn't quite get on with it, but I have wanted to have another go at it since, and I'm going to do it this month, so I'm going to do it tomorrow. Wish me luck. It's the story of an English tutor living in, I think, Belgium, who falls in love with a student. Beyond that, I'm not entirely sure, so wish me luck. If I manage to finish The Folding Star in time, I will also try to get in a reread of The New Black by Evie Shockley. This is a poetry collection that I picked up last year and I love. And I would love to have another reading of it. And if I don't read it this month, or in the last days of February, I will probably reread it in April, because I have a poetry project in the works for April, hoping I don't jinx myself. And starting March 1st, for March of the Mammoths, I will be having it out with Maria Theresa, The Habsburg Empress in Her Time by Barbara Stollberg-Rillinger. This is a massive biography of Maria Theresa, who was the Archduchess of Austria and Holy Roman Empress, who, while as far as the Holy Roman Empire was concerned, she was Empress Consort. She was, for all intents and purposes, in charge. And this book comes in at about 1,000. How big is this book? Okay, well over 1,000 pages. So, yeah, definitely works for March of the Mammoths. So I don't know how long Maria Theresa is going to take me. It might take me a few weeks. Certainly, it will be. I'm thinking it'll be the rest of this week, starting on Tuesday, going into next weekend. Probably a good chunk of that week. So I might. I'm not entirely sure. So if I do have to go over a few weekly reads for Maria Theresa, I'll probably do some sort of other plans I'm doing in March, during that kind of like the preview period of my weekly reads. So anyway, so what have I been watching? So obviously, if you watched my part 29 of my 2022 library tour, you will know that this is this week saw the finale of Celebrity Big Brother, which I've been watching with my mom. It's one of the few shows that we kind of watched together. I do much prefer the primary Big Brother that takes place during the summer and has regular people, or relatively regular people. Celebrity Big Brother is usually a bit of a disappointment, and this season was no exception. Um, my mom didn't particularly care for anybody in the house. I was rather fond of Carson, and I was bummed when he was evicted. So anyway, and then I also watched the Cuphead show on Netflix. The Cuphead show is the animated adaptation of the video game Cuphead, which is about two brothers, Cuphead and Mugman, who find themselves in some trouble with the devil. And in order to save themselves, they have to go travel around the Inkwell Isles to collect the souls of other people who owe the devil their souls, which involves a lot of incredibly hard boss battles. I've never played the game. It's probably far too hard for me because I stink at video games. As much as I love video games, I stink at playing them. But I have seen the game played. I watched it, I think, shortly after it came out in either 2017 or 2018. Chris Plays Games, booktuber. Not booktuber. He was a streamer who played video games. He played it, and I watched it, and I really enjoyed watching him play it, even though, again, Cuphead is incredibly hard and frustrated the heck out of him. So, anyway, so I watched the series, and I really enjoyed it. It was quite fun. So, yeah, if you have Netflix and would like to watch it, definitely do so. It is quite hilarious, I think. So, anyway, BookTube, that was Weekly Reads. I will be back on Monday. Obviously, next week we'll see the continuation of my 2022 library tour. We have 3 more weeks of it. And all science fiction and fantasy, so gird yourselves. One thing I'm kind of learning about, at least the science fiction and fantasy side of my library, is it's in need of a culling. Definitely. And then on Monday, I'm also going to have my February book haul. It's going to be pretty big. So what I might do is I might do the part 30 of the library tour in the morning, if I have time. And then do the library tour, not the library tour, the mail haul, or book haul, I'm sorry. I'm getting a bit tired now. During my regular filming period. So, I don't know if I'm going to do any tag videos next week. Tags seem to be a little bit light. So yeah. But anyway, BookTube, that's all I've got for this week. So I will see you on Monday. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great evening and weekend, and stay safe.